This is Chuck Schaefer of HCM TV, and I am joined by Scott Sessions of HireVue. Scott, thank you for joining me today.
Thanks for having me, Chuck. Glad to be here.
Scott, HireVue is an interesting video recording app that seems to be pushing the innovation envelope in talent acquisition. Could you describe exactly what the solution does, how the company describes your application?
Certainly. Well, HireVue is a digital interviewing platform. It allows hiring managers to work with HR in a very efficient manner to create interview questions in our platform. Then, candidates are invited to respond to those questions using a webcam, an iPhone, or an iPad. When they do that, those interviews are then collected into our SAS platform, our SaaS platform into the cloud. Managers can then review those interviews when they want to do it, anytime, anywhere. And then as managers review it, they can rate them, and when they come to a group or small pool of candidates, they can share those interviews with other hiring managers to get more feedback, to ultimately hire the best possible candidate.
You know, it's an app that is supporting an interesting process. I like the way you described it. What are the bottom line benefits for your customers that are pursuing this process?
Great question. So, bottom line, it's a fair, consistent interview. The digital interview process is not like the analog interview process, which was scheduling, rescheduling, and oh yeah, schedule it again, okay? This is done when the candidate wants to do it, within the time frames that the company has established, and then the manager reviews it when they want to do it. And the candidate gets to respond to the exact same questions that all the other candidates respond to. So that's where the fair and consistent process comes in.
You know, I like consistency. You're scheduling the questions. I'm sure you're sorting through to ask the best questions so that all candidates are responding to the same set of questions. But those responses are coming in an unstructured format. So when they're received, how does the organization rate or rank them to put some structure back to them so that they can be compared?
That's a really great question. So as the candidate responds to questions, each question will have its own video clip, and that's contained within our platform. The reviewer can then watch that video and then rate and add notes on a per question basis. And then when they share that with other managers, they too can rate and add notes on a per question basis. So ultimately, when they get to the end, they can compare each candidate on a graph, if you will, to find the best rated candidates and then select the top 2 or 3, which can then come in for a face-to-face at that time, or move into our live video platform and conduct a more probing interview, still recorded, that can be shared with others for additional response.
Does this type of new technology, this type of digitally recorded interview, pose any new legal type questions or scenarios that customers want to get their heads around first?
That's, again, another great question. We get that question frequently. So ultimately, when you record a response, you have data to back up the hiring decision that you made. In fact, there are opinion letters that have come out of the EEOC and Seyfarth Shaw that have said video interviewing is really no different than sourcing a candidate using LinkedIn, Facebook. You're ultimately going to see the candidates by the time you bring them in. So that really is a moot point. And when you can show, here's the reason why we hired this candidate, here are their responses, you have a fully defensible position because you can compare the other candidates and say, you tell me why I hired this person. This is why.
Very good. You know, one of the claims that your application makes, which is really interesting, is no more bad interviews. We've all been there. In fact, you know, most interviews are not successful. How do you fulfill that claim? How do you eliminate bad interviews?
Well, if you've ever been in a bad interview, and I'm sure you have been in a bad interview, some of those bad interviews, you're sitting in there for 90 seconds and you realize, I've got to spend another 45 minutes here. Well, with a digital interview, that goes away, because now when you're reviewing that videoed interview, you can skip, pause, fast forward, or when you said, you know what, I get the answer here, I'm going to go to the next question. That's why there are no more bad interviews, because you don't have to waste your time with candidates that you're not going to move forward with.
For the recruiting or HR manager that's about to deploy this type of technology, what advice would you offer them?
You know, be open-minded. You've accepted the fact that you need to go digital. Now, get the rest of your organization on board with that. HireVue is at the ready to support you and ensure your success. And so we do onboarding meetings, and any stakeholder that needs to be a part of it, bring them on. In fact, once the stakeholders start to see it, they begin to evangelize to help the HR managers and spread the word that, hey, I don't have to do an interview today. I'm going to review those tonight or on my way to my next sales meeting that's across the country, because I can look at them on the plane. I don't have to worry about scheduling and, hey, that guy didn't show up. And that evangelizing really catches fire within the company.
Very good. And with that comment, I think we're at a good break point to conclude our conversation. This is Chuck Schaefer. I've been joined by Scott Sessions of HireVue. Scott, thank you for joining me today.
Thanks a lot, Chuck. It was a pleasure.